This week on Jerusalem Dateline, U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton coordinates with Israeli leaders and says Trump will enforce a tough line on Iran. Plus, a jihadi training camp for children, not in the Middle East, but in the USA. And King David makes an appearance back in Jerusalem in a light and sound show spectacular. All this and more this week on Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton spoke to reporters during a 4-day visit to Israel. His central message: the Trump administration will enforce its tough line on Iran. That may not seem remarkable in Washington, but to Israelis, it's a breath of fresh air. Throughout his visit, Bolton stressed for Israelis that the U.S. will never allow Iran to get nuclear weapons. And he noted that the strict economic sanctions on Iran are generating real anti-government protests.
And by bringing the hammer down again of reimposing American sanctions, we've seen a profound negative effect on Iran. I think actually more serious than we would have predicted. And what's significant about the demonstrations and outpourings that you've seen across Iran is that, to the best of our knowledge, they're not organized. This is not some kind of conspiracy in Iran. It's just regular people saying they're fed up with the government.
Bolton's 4-day stay here was longer than most official visits. That's partly because the White House is preparing to lay the groundwork for the rollout of its Middle East peace plan. He made it clear that the U.S. will not impose its plan on either Israel or the Palestinians, but he's skeptical about whether Israel has a real peace partner.
I can't even begin to count the number of ceasefires we've heard from Hamas, Hezbollah, other terrorist groups over the years. I would be stunned if anybody in the government of Israel is viewing this with anything other than very, very clear-eyed understanding of what it's about. It's a sad outcome for the Palestinian people that all they've got now is a choice between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority.
For Israelis, the fact that Bolton spent several days with the country's top leadership is a refreshing change of pace. Caroline Glick is chief columnist for the Jerusalem Post.
What you're really seeing here is a business-like atmosphere of two allies coming together and discussing common interests, which is something that we haven't seen in the past from U.S. administrations who were blind to the basic reality, which is that Israel is the United States' most powerful ally in the Middle East.
For the first time in nearly a year, the leader of ISIS, Abu al-Baghdadi, released an audio recording where he urged his followers to persevere and continue fighting the group's enemies everywhere. It's a reminder of the continuing battle with radical Islam all over the world. And one surprising example, when authorities raided a makeshift compound in the New Mexico desert earlier this month, they were searching for a missing boy. Instead, officials say they uncovered a jihadist camp training children to carry out attacks. As CBN national security correspondent Eric Rosales explains, they're concerned there could be more camps like it across America.
It's a frightening thought. Islamic training camps right here in our backyard. As we reported, investigators suspected their existence for years. Now this latest discovery shows they may exist in larger numbers than expected.
There are so many people in the United States that espouse the jihadi extremist ideology who are doing either fundraising in the United States, training in the United States to conduct attacks here in the homeland and abroad.
Former CIA operative Joseph Assad says extremists exploit laws in the United States like religious freedom, creating sleeper cells, often operating off the grid until they're ready to strike.
In the CIA, we actually used to believe that it is by the grace of God and good work by our partners in the FBI that we had stumbled upon things such as the camp in New Mexico.
At that compound, police say Islamic extremist leaders trained children to become school shooters. Investigators found 11 emaciated children and the remains of a 3-year-old boy. An FBI agent testified they were told the 3-year-old died as part of a ritual to expel demons.
They told the kids, and they all seemed to genuinely believe, that this boy would resurrect, come back as Jesus, and Jesus would tell them what targets to hit in terrorist attacks.
Ryan Morrow with the Clarion Project says it's no surprise these training camps exist in the U.S., but it is rare to get evidence for a raid. Morrow says one known as the Jamaat al-Fruco group claims to have 22 training camps across the country.
They haven't been cracked down upon because they're not going out and trying to kill people right now. They've done so in the past, but right now they're not. Why? Because when you build up an infrastructure that massive and you're making that millions of dollars and sending them over to Pakistan, why would you try to carry out a violent plot and risk losing everything?
Morrow says most people think of radical Islam as just an act of terrorism, getting virgins in paradise. But radical jihadist groups have beliefs about the end times of Islamic prophecy, where a war will take place between a Messiah figure and the Antichrist.
Most of them believe that that will be Israel, the West, someone from there. And when the Mahdi wages this war, he will win because Jesus will come to his side. The Muslim Jesus will show up, will break a cross, and prohibit Christianity.
Experts say the ultimate goal of radical Islam is not just to inflict terror by attacking our nation, but to inspire homegrown terrorists from within, committed by Americans against Americans. Eric Rosales, CBN News, Washington.
The ban against the Muslim burqa is spreading across Europe. Denmark banned face coverings in public places earlier this month. That made them the 5th European country to do so. And in Britain, comments from politician Boris Johnson about the burqa are threatening his political career. Dale Hurd has the story.
I have nothing to say about this matter except to offer you some tea.
Britain's former Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson does not look bothered at all over the criticism heaped upon him after writing a newspaper article defending the right of women to wear burqas. If he'd only done that, he would have been called a hero in politically correct Britain, but Johnson couldn't resist adding that burqas make women look like letterboxes and bank robbers. The left went crazy. Prime Minister Theresa May acted appalled, and Johnson's Conservative Party has launched an investigation. The Muslim Council of Britain says Johnson must be held to account.
This is something that has impacted Muslim women across the country in many different ways, in particular within verbal assaults from on the street. This is a serious concern and should not be thrown away as something obviously trivial.
This in a country where insults of Christians and Christianity are perfectly fine.
British Muslims are far from a majority in this country, but their influence already exceeds their actual numbers.
And women are still allowed to wear the burqa in Britain while it has been banned or regulated in over a dozen nations, including Denmark. While most former Muslims view the burqa as a symbol of oppression, the European left marches in support of it.
I see it as a part of my faith, and now it has also become a part of my identity, which is why I feel so strongly about it.
But it's not natural to walk around in Denmark looking like a living tent. I think it's absolutely crucial that we have a burqa ban. Otherwise, we will end up like London.
Norwegian filmmaker Walid Al-Kubaisi, who made a documentary about the history of the Muslim headscarf and burqa, calls them the logo of the Muslim Brotherhood and a visible sign of growing Muslim power in society, a much more serious charge than saying the burqa makes a woman look like a mailbox. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
President Trump says he won't make any concessions with Turkey to get detained American pastor Andrew Brunson out of the country. Trump told Reuters he thought he had a deal with Turkey's president when he helped persuade Israel to release a Turkish citizen it had detained. Trump said he expected President Erdogan to free Brunson, calling the pastor, quote, a very innocent and wonderful man, and great father and great Christian. But Turkey denies it ever agreed to release Brunson in return. Coming up, a former boycotter of Israel buys a boycotted company for $3.2 billion. PepsiCo announced it would buy the Israeli company SodaStream for $3.2 billion. PepsiCo wants to compete with Coca-Cola in the health drink market. What is ironic is that PepsiCo joined the Arab boycott against the Jewish state decades ago. And that boycott was broken during the early years of the peace process in the mid-1990s. 20 years later, the BDS, Boycott, Divest, and Sanctions movement forced SodaStream to move its operation out of an Israeli community in the West Bank. And that effort ended the jobs of hundreds of Palestinian Arab workers. Here's a story we did about SodaStream several years ago, when it employed hundreds of Palestinians before it moved its factory out of the Israeli town of Ma'ale Adumim. It's a side of the Israeli-Palestinian relationship that's rarely seen.
Salam alaikum. This is SodaStream, the leading manufacturer of home beverage carbonation systems. It also has a practical solution for building Israeli-Palestinian-Arab relations.
This factory here used to be a munitions factory until about 15 years ago. The Israeli military made munitions for artillery. And then SodaStream came and transformed it into a soda factory. And we're turning bullets into bubbles. And the statue reads here in Hebrew, and you shall beat your swords into plowshares and your spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, nor shall they learn war anymore.
And that's from Isaiah the prophet.
That's right.
Daniel Birnbaum leads SodaStream, a company more than 100 years old.
We're at the plastics flowing section of the factory where we make more than 2 million bottles. Bottles like these that you can make soda with at home.
How many drinks can I get out of this?
You can use this to make 10,000 bottles of soda at home.
I visited its largest plant in Mishor Adumim, located just outside Jerusalem. It's an area the Bible calls Judea, and much of the world refers to as the West Bank.
So we're selling our product in 45 countries around the world.
45?
Yeah. Not all of them are getting product from this factory, because some of the countries, the Nordic markets, for example, they don't want anything from this factory. Yes, because they think that it's a discriminatory apartheid situation. They don't want to touch it. So what we do for them is we make this product in a different factory, in China or in some other location. What a shame.
Yeah, it really is. Actress Scarlett Johansson was forced to make a choice between her work with SodaStream and Oxfam, a group fighting global poverty. Johansson is seen here in this Super Bowl commercial.
Start with plain water, add bubbles, mix in the perfect flavor. Look, a soda that's better for you and all of us.
But Oxfam told Johansson her work with SodaStream was incompatible because it furthers the poverty of the Palestinians. Johansson stood up for SodaStream.
So when I came here about 7 years ago, I inherited this facility. It did not employ Palestinians, it only employed Israelis. And I decided that it's the right thing to do is to employ people who also live in the area. And it evolved into a very interesting demographic situation where we have more Palestinians than Jews.
So how did they get along with each other? Any conflicts, any problems?
Scott, we are the largest employer of Palestinian people in the world, outside of the Palestinian Authority. We employ 500 Palestinians here, side by side with 350 Israeli Arabs and another 300 Israeli Jews. And we get along together. They're not killing each other, look, okay? And when we go to lunch break, we break bread together and we get to know each other.
SodaStream pays Israeli wages, 4 times what workers would earn in the Palestinian Authority, where unemployment is 30%. Workers say they're happy.
In the first year, the salary helped me to build a home and put a land. In the first year.
In the
first year, yes.
Are you a Palestinian Arab?
A Palestinian Arab, yes.
How do you get along with your Jewish co-workers?
Allah, everything is good. I work with the Jewish. No discrimination between Jewish or Arab people.
The plant produces about 15,000 soda makers a day. There are dozens of regular, diet, and naturally sweetened flavors, boasting far fewer calories than bottled soft drinks. And reusing the bottles means less damage to the environment.
This is the valve assembly room. And I call this room the United Nations because we have people from all over here. You'll see Palestinians and Israelis, and you'll see Russian immigrants and Ethiopians and Bedouins, women and men. I love this hall.
Sadly, disturbances by some Palestinian employees during fighting between Israel and Hamas earlier this summer led to the firing of dozens of Palestinians. Management says things are now back on track. Nevertheless, Birnbaum says the company is doing its part to build bridges and make peace.
So every single soda maker that we make here, every single soda maker that you would buy at Walmart or Bed Bath or Target or wherever, was made by a Jew and a Palestinian together living in harmony. And that gives me goosebumps.
Yeah, me too.
That's a miracle.
Up next, a look at a growing phenomenon in the Muslim world. Muslims coming to faith in Jesus Christ. It's called Eid al-Adha, the Muslim holiday of Qurban or sacrifice. It marks the end of the pilgrimage to Mecca called the Hajj. It's a time when Muslims celebrate Abraham or Ibrahim's near sacrifice of Ishmael in Mecca. He was stopped by an angel, they say, and Allah provided a ram in the thicket instead. While millions celebrate this feast around the world, a growing number of Muslims in North Africa are coming to faith in Jesus Christ. Here's an early report from CBN's George Thomas documenting this phenomenon.
These images of North Africans worshipping have never been seen before on television. As the sun sets over the Mediterranean Sea, Muslims across this part of Africa are converting to faith in Jesus Christ in record numbers.
What God is doing in North Africa, all the way from actually Mauritania to Libya, is unprecedented in history of missions.
Tino Kahush, a graduate of Regent University, has spent years traveling the region to document the transformation.
I have the privilege of recording testimonies and listening to first-hand stories of men and women, all ages, where they can be sitting in a room and see the appearance, the presence of God appear to them in reality. It's like a vision. Some of them gave me stories of they carry a conversation. It's not just a light that appears.
His interviews confirm what experts say is a profound move of God in the predominantly Muslim nations of Mauritania, Western Sahara, Morocco, Algeria, Libya, and Tunisia.
Sometimes I feel jealous. How come it's visiting the Muslim world at this time and age where we don't hear that happening in the traditional Christian community?
From the shores of Casablanca in Morocco to Tripoli, Libya, experts say the growth of Christianity, especially in the last 20 years, has been unprecedented. And nowhere is that growth more evident than in the North African nation of Algeria.
In fact, we never thought the Algerian church would grow so big.
Pastor Salah leads one of the largest churches in Algeria, where 99% of the population is Muslim. He says every new Christian in his church came from a Muslim background. Some 1,200 believers attend the church.
In fact, since we started as a church until today, we've baptized on average 150 to 160 believers per year.
Men like Zino, who was invited to attend Pastor Salah's church by a friend.
I saw Algerians worshiping God with all their hearts, and it touched me.
Others like Farhat speak of miraculous encounters. He says he was illiterate and couldn't read the Bible when he accepted the Lord. Then God made a change.
Since then, I've read the Bible and understood the Word of God. This is just an example of what God has done in my life, and this is the case of many people here in Algeria.
Even though Algeria is overwhelmingly Muslim, the government has given Protestant churches the freedom to register their congregations.
It is the first Muslim Arab government who recognized officially churches from Islam.
Yusuf Kurahmani is a leading Algerian pastor. He says the government will harass and intimidate Christians from time to time, but the level of persecution is nothing like it was 20 years ago.
God has given us many opportunities to witness at the police stations, at the courts. And actually, once I went to the police station and they gave me 45 minutes to speak about Jesus. Just imagine yourself, they are all Muslims. Well, tell us about Jesus, please.
But Algeria and the countries of North Africa weren't always open to the gospel. Peter is a veteran missionary in these parts.
You know, there's that parable, the sower went out to sow and the seed fell on stony ground. This is North Africa. In those days was quite resistant and stony.
For security reasons, we've altered his voice and concealed his identity.
The religion and the culture were unsympathetic to anything that was foreign, and Christianity was considered to be the religion of the Europeans.
Peter believes the arrival of satellite TV and the internet have dramatically changed people's perception of Christianity.
Today in North Africa on TV you can hear native Arab Christians talking about their faith, who are mature Christians, answering questions, involved in debates.
Emboldened by God's power, Algerian Christians are now on a mission to take the gospel to the four corners of the globe.
God has put in our heart to be able to send 1,000 missionaries by the year 2025. And I really believe maybe one day America will end up with some Muslim converts, missionaries coming to reach out to the Muslims there and other parts as well.
George Thomas, CBN News, along the shores of the Mediterranean.
Just ahead, the life and legacy of King David in sound and sight in the heart of his capital, Jerusalem. King David played a major role in the history of Jerusalem for more than 3,000 years. Now from the Old City, a new light and sound show celebrates his life and legacy. 4 nights a week, the ancient walls of the Tower of David Museum become a canvas for telling the story of the shepherd boy who would lead Israel.
But we don't have objects, material. There are not pictures of King David. So I decided to make it throughout, 2 pieces of art. And there are masterpieces. Let's travel through art to meet the king.
And in that journey, the audience learns how David became a universal figure.
David in the Muslim religion is a prophet. For the Christian, is in the roots of Christ. And for the Jews, he reunified all the tribes in one site in Jerusalem, the capital of the Jewish people.
To see the story of King David was a dream because, as you know, this citadel called after his name. And he is the king who established the city. He is the king of the Bible. He's the musician, and we feel it's a gift for him. King David left his legacy, which is the music.
When you come to Jerusalem, please consider seeing this amazing sound and light show. Well, that's all for this edition. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.